Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun that are of interest to women worldwide. Here's Nadia Jordana.
Hello, and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Nadia Jordana. Our program today has a special guest, Melissa Gouty. She's an author and a columnist, among many other things. We'll be meeting her during the program today, but first let's meet our moderator, Jamela Pettiford, and the other co-hosts.
Welcome to It's a Woman's World. We're going to talk about the magic of ordinary. Welcome. I want to welcome all of my co-hosts and all the folks that will be talking with me today as we introduce our wonderful guest. I have Melissa Nambangi.
Yes.
Welcome, Melissa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad
And we
to be
have
here.
Candy Pettiford. Thank you, Candy Pettiford, for being here.
Well, I'm going to love this. We're going to have a good time, you guys.
Yes. And then we have Nadia Jordana. Hi, Nadia.
Hi, Jamela. I'm so happy I could be here today.
Yes, and thank you. And last but not least, we have our wonderful guest, Miss Melissa Gouty. She is going to be talking about her book, and I get to walk her through. And my name is Jamela Pettiford, and I will be your host for today. Well, welcome, Melissa. Let's talk about the magic of ordinary.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here and to get to talk to you and to tell you a little bit about my book. I have been a writer since I was a child and love books. I love reading, and somehow that just soaked into my blood. And I was blessed to live with a family who loved books. They were educated. My parents were both college educated, and we went to the library for fun. We were some of those nerdy girls who went to the library on a Saturday instead of partying, and
There you go.
that gets into your blood. And I became a writer. I went to college and became an English major, and I taught at the community college level for 23 years, all the time while I was writing. But the book came about after the death of my father. My dad was the kind of guy that everybody loved. He had the joie de vivre, the joy of life. He had faith. He was kind. He was generous. And I know that sounds like I'm making him perfect, and he was not. But he was a really all-around good guy. And when he died, I started thinking I should write some of these stories. And pretty soon those stories became a chapter, and each chapter became a sequence. And at the end of 9 months, when we first retired, I gave birth to my manuscript. And it's a tribute to people like our family everywhere, ordinary salt of the earth people who will never be wealthy or famous or do anything of note in the world of recognition, but who are good people who love their families. And I didn't want that to be forgotten. So many books are about celebrity and drug addiction and sex abuse and all those terrible things, that I wanted to tell a decent story of an ordinary family.
Yes.
I wonder, do you have a favorite story in the book you could share with us?
Oh, favorites, though. That's like asking your favorite child.
Oh my goodness.
I have a couple that stand out in my mind. One is, it's called The Thanksgiving Witch. And when I was about 5 years old, my dad took me with him to his great aunt's house. And it was in the middle of a field in a country, Illinois field, Indiana field. And I was little and I was scared to death. The house was falling down. And we had a Thanksgiving dinner that had been wrapped in styrofoam package, and he was taking Thanksgiving dinner to his Aunt Jean. Well, we got there, and I was terrified because she was a hoarder, and she literally was crazy. And it was so scary that here was this woman. There was actually herds of cats in her house. It was horrible. It smelled. There was urine everywhere. There were packs of newspaper and trash, and I was just almost angry at my dad. And I said, Daddy, why did you bring me here? And at the end of this, he basically said, because there, but for the grace of God, go I.
That's
And
right.
kind
That's
of a
right.
lesson in compassion that as a young child, I kind of saw what he was doing. So that's a fun, poignant, scary story. That's one of my favorites.
It's a great one.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
You like cat? Do you like cats to this day? Do you like cats?
I still love cats, but there was
Okay.
in my Aunt Jean's house, there was actually a dead cat
Oh,
on a chair just lying there. And Daddy said, Aunt Jean, that cat is dead. And she pointed her finger at him and she said, No, Melford, that cat is not dead. He is fine. And just this crazy story. And I was terrified. But
You know what? But what's so nice about that is there's so many families that have so many quirky nuances that many times, you know, we don't talk about that one crazy person that always comes over, that always shows out, that every family has that one or two people or the whole family of that family that when they come over, you know, oh, okay.
yes, yes. And thank you for saying that, because one of the things that's important to know about my book, yes, it's a memoir, but it's not my story. It's a lot of people's stories.
Yeah.
It's the universal experiences of any family, of families who love each other and have strife and get through difficulties. It's not just something that happened to me. Most every family has similar stories that are in my book.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I guess that's why I kind of just connected with the title. I mean, growing up all the way in Cameroon, in West Africa, and reading about your dad. That's the way I feel about my dad. It's like we got a pick of the crop. We got the best dad possible, you know.
Yes.
So it's then I think of this daughter-father dynamic, because the little girls tend to love their dads differently. In fact, I'm just impressed that my mother never got jealous of the fact that I preferred my dad anytime. You know, I obeyed him 100%. But the influence they have on the daughter, that positive role model of a man, because when you listen to society, there seems to be these women are from Venus and men are from Mars dynamics, so they can never be peace. Then you see your dad, who is such a wonderful male figure in your life. And I'm thinking, so now I know he must have influenced your writing. Are there other ways in which you can see his influence in your life?
Are there other ways my dad influenced me other than my writing? Oh,
Yes.
many. One of the things that I think is most impressive is his spirit of generosity.
Okay.
He never talked about it. I mean, he didn't make a big deal, but he was forever taking cobblers or flower bouquets from his garden, or going to see shut-ins after church, or doing all kinds of small acts of kindness. And not only was he an exemplary male figure, he was an example of what the small acts of kindness can do to change the world. And they weren't big things. They were just constant small acts of goodness. And that, I think, has influenced me, especially now as I get older and I see so much more need than I used to, that I trying more to follow his example. Now, this isn't to say that my mother wasn't a wonderful person also. She was very different than my dad, and very aloof and kind of rigid, and I didn't have the same soul connection with her that I did with my dad. I love my mother and we had a good relationship, but it wasn't the same kind of thing, and that may be the father-daughter dynamic.
You said his name. What is his name? Say his name again.
Melford. Melford. Yes.
What nationality is that from? Melford?
I don't know. It was just, there was actually, we grew up in southern Indiana and right across from Louisville. And my dad said that his mother had been on a bus in Louisville and driven by a street named Melford.
Oh,
and she decided to name him that. My uncles were named Virgil and Elton as
Oh.
well, so also kind of a little at the time unique
Mhm.
names.
Wow, nice.
Interesting.
The comment I was going to make before, and then I make sure I give everybody else a chance to speak. I think one of the most outstanding things is the fact that you point out that you were not like a rich, wealthy family. And I think that's very important because when you see children grow up with certain characteristics and amenities and behavior of that, you think it's because they could afford it. But here is a story of an ordinary family, which really brought out the best, even being generous without being. So there is so much that I'm really looking forward to laying my hands on that book because it connects a lot with some.
Thank you
many
so
people.
much. Yeah, thank you. I think
Yeah.
it does. It's like I said, which is the strange thing is that made it very, very hard to find a publisher because publishers want to get authors who are either well known already or have this sensational story.
True.
This is not a sensational story. This is an average story of a loving family, well written, I hope. But that is not the kind of thing that an agent or publisher will say, hey, I'm going to swoop that up. But in fact, in my mind, there are lots of people who would want to read that.
That's true.
That aren't as interested in the wealthy and the celebrity and the fame and all that kind of stuff.
One thing I'd like to point out and have you comment on, Melissa, is this book you've just written is a recent chapter in your life, and there have been some very interesting major chapters prior to now through your columns, newspaper columns that you've written, business enterprise that you and your
Yes.
husband did, which I think is very fascinating, the concept that you did with that. Could you tell us a little bit about those things?
Sure. As I said, I have always been a writer, so it was no surprise that in the early 90s, I decided I wanted to try to actually publish. And so I started with my local newspaper, and I started with a column on the death of Jim Henson, who had done Kermit the Frog, and I had little
Right.
kids at the time, and so they took it and liked it, and so I continued to write columns. Then we moved to Danville, Illinois, and I did the same thing here. I approached the local newspaper, and I got a gig as a weekly columnist. Started on a Wednesday and grew to popularity, and they moved it to a Sunday. And those were, again, human interest, family-oriented, warm-hearted observations of the world kind of columns. And I was teaching at the time. I taught for 23 years. We got remarried. I married my current husband in 2002. And we decided that I'd been teaching for 23 years. I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I was good at it, but I was very tired of the grading all the papers and of the politics that got involved.
Politics.
And I decided it was time to try something else. And my husband and I, he is a contractor, and we got this crazy idea. You know how sometimes things happen and you look back and you think we were nuts. We got this crazy idea that we were going to open a sewing store in Danville because there were none. We didn't have a Joann's, we didn't have anything, and I like to creatively sew and wanted to find access. So we started doing research. We researched for a year and a half, and we decided to open up a quilt shop and a sewing machine retail center. But my husband came home and said, I know where we're going to open it up. We looked at lots of buildings and we couldn't afford any of them. He said, we're going to buy that abandoned nursing home. And I looked at him and sneered, are you crazy? I mean, this was a 16,000 square foot building, abandoned nursing home. And he said, no, it'll be perfect. We'll open up the back half as an office building. We'll do the quilt shop in the front. So that's what we did. We opened that in 2006. In 2007 and 2008, the economy really took a dive. We are in a not very a lot of our town is not very prosperous. And we were trying to make this regional destination center where people who loved to quilt could come in. Well, we decided, because the offices weren't going well, to turn it into a quilt shop, a retreat center. So we had overnight rooms where people all over the Midwest could come. They could bring their aunts, their friends, their sisters. They could sew for 5 days, 3 days, a weekend. We would bring in quilt teachers, gurus to come in and give workshops. And that put us on the map. And we did that for 11 years. It was wonderful. The creative people that you meet are beyond compare. But it was also grueling. It was 7 days a week. I worked every weekend. We were on call every night. You know, lots of things happen on the night when you have people staying overnight that you have to go attend to. And so we were lucky enough to be able to sell the business in 2017 and retire, sort of, which is when I started writing full time.
Now, thinking about getting back to your dad, how many is in your family, brothers and sisters? And what did your dad do? I mean, well, what kind of work did he do?
My dad he had a business major in college and had gone to college on the GI Bill. He actually was kind of a basic business degree, and he went into management of what's Stewart's Dry Goods Stores, which in Louisville was a big department store. I don't know if any of you guys know Louisville or not. But it was a big department store, the old kind, 7 floors with a tea room and a soda fountain in the basement. And they sold everything from clothes to candy to everything, housewares, they had a furniture floor.
Like a Montgomery Ward's.
Yes, only a little bit nicer, probably. And then he managed that until he retired when he was in his 60s.
Brothers and sisters.
So,
my sisters, I have 2 sisters. I'm the middle child. I have an older sister, Melanie, and a younger sister, Michelle. They are both prominent in the book. One of the stories about Melanie is, well, several, but my favorite chapter about Melanie is called Invitation to a Hero. And it's about her high school boyfriend. And my parents were very, very strict. And he was the first person that Daddy invited to dinner spontaneously after Melanie had burned it totally to ashes. He had come over to visit. She was on the front porch talking to him. She'd forgotten she had dinner on the stove, and Mother and Daddy came home from work, didn't know that this had happened. And he said, well, Tommy, why don't you stay for dinner? So we come in the house, it's smoky, the steak is like charred. And the story is about my crush on her boyfriend, who was so nice and took her to prom. And the night of prom, he actually brought my mother roses. So that's a very tender story. And I have several stories about my little sister as well. One is, my favorite is the time she was 6 and my dad pulled her tooth. And she was in the garage screaming, "You're killing me! You're killing me!" at the top of her lungs.
That is funny.
Those are things that probably every family has. The time that my dad trimmed our bangs and got them so crooked that it but I know we're not the only family that happened to. So
which of the kids did he deliver?
I'm sorry?
Which of the kids did he deliver?
My younger sister, dad, thank you. You've read the whole book. My dad actually had to accidentally deliver my baby sister. My mother didn't have any labor or whatever. And my dad had to deliver my baby sister in the bathroom. And we tease her cruelly about that. Mercilessly, we say things like, "You're swimming like a fish from the day you were born," because she actually fell in the snow.
Wow.
That's sibling stuff.
Yes. Wow. But what is so nice is that everything that you have talked about within your book, every one I've been able to relate to, you know, from the hair cutting, having my dad cut my hair. I mean, having my dad be my hero, being a daddy's girl and understanding that dynamic and thinking that he's one of the most wonderful, most intellectual people that I've ever met. And sometimes when I'm going through emotional stuff, my first go-to, of some things to help me figure out, am I just being a imbalanced woman, or is this real? Know? And oftentimes the dad-daughter dynamic, he'll tell you, well, I know how you are, and this is what it is. And so that balance is so powerful. What a great idea. What a great way to really normalize the magic of ordinary.
And it helps remind us in a lot of ways. There are so many different kinds of fathers, and a range of talents, and we should appreciate them. Father's Day is right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
Yep.
Appreciate them. And yes, I know that not all fathers are perfect. Some are less than perfect. Some are way less than perfect. But even those fathers deserve some appreciation for the good things that they do, and the effort that they do make for their children. So across the wide range, fathers and families are very important.
Mm-hmm. And without the fathers, we wouldn't be here. Without their code, it wouldn't be me that would be here.
Right. That's right. That's right.
I'd like to also point out my dad's best friend is the counterpoint in the book to my dad. He became a Catholic priest. Now we are not Catholic, we're Protestant, so it was we were kind of always on the odd fish out. But Father Pete it was my dad's best friend for 70 years. And he was part of every family. So the counterbalance to the book is Father Pete, to my dad, and is Father Pete, who runs through the whole book and shows a life of goodness without a family. I really like that part. And he is a very dear man, still living, and I still talk to him about once a month.
Melissa, there was a story. Did I read correctly? You have an aunt, and then when your grandfather died was when your father discovered a surprising heritage in the family.
Yes, and I think that chapter really has become very appropriate for the time in which we live, and that was another good lesson to our whole family. When my grandfather died in 1963, my dad and his family were at the funeral home, and I didn't find this out until I was an adult because my parents wouldn't talk about it in front of their children. As an adult, we found out that when the funeral home was opened for visitation, a Black woman came in and said, "I want to see my brother." And my dad said, "Well, ma'am, his name's Henry Johnson. That's a very common name. You must mean someone else." And she said, "No, I want to see my brother." And it turns out that my grandfather's father had remarried into a Black family and not told anybody. So there had been kind of this division in the family, but my grandfather had half siblings who, were Black family in a different part of the town. So one of the graces that my dad had is he taught us that, he just accepted that. He loved Mary Elizabeth. He went to the funeral of his great aunt who he really didn't know. Whereas my mother didn't like to talk about that much. And again, you look at, this was very different in 1963.
Oh, yes.
So I appreciated that was a lesson that he showed, that, prejudice has no place when you love people.
Thank you.
And he was very good at accepting that and trying to always be part of the other family as well.
And that is the American family. I mean,
yes,
that is the American family. I mean, if you have been here from, I dare say, for more than 4 generations, you can expect to understand that is the American family. And I think that is why it is so important that we look out and are kind to one another, because this is as American as apple pie. This bloodline and these bloodlines intermingling in this way.
Exactly.
I want to know about your mother and father's relationship. How did you see that as a child?
Oh, and as an adult, I
Oh,
joke,
yes.
I joke about that in the book, or talk about that, because to myself and my sisters, we think, what did they ever connect on? Because my dad was very outgoing and jovial and not worried and didn't care about appearances and loved to garden and be outside. My mother is very prim and very proper and, like I said, a little more rigid and kind of aloof, and didn't like to be outside. She liked to shop and she liked to read, and so we always wondered, what did they see? But obviously kids never know about their parents. You can't understand that. They were married for 62 years. They raised 3 daughters who they sent to college through hard work and sacrifice, and got to see their grandkids. So I didn't understand their relationship, but
Right.
obviously it worked.
Was mom the disciplinarian then?
Yes, probably. We
You
were
said the
pretty,
rigid. When you said rigid, I kind of picked up dad was more the, have
yes,
to go, everything's
Yeah.
great. And mom was
yes,
more, hey, let's
yes,
get down to
yes,
brass tacks
yes,
here
yeah,
now.
and
Okay,
yes,
I got that.
exactly.
Pick that up.
And she, because of the mother-daughter dynamics, she was at a disadvantage anyway, because often, and I don't know that you know that, but often mothers and daughters struggle.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
there's
Oh,
always,
oh
Oh,
yeah.
yes. And you know what, Melissa? What's so wonderful about the magic of ordinary is there's so much to unpack that we really could talk for another 10, 15, 20 minutes unpacking the magic of ordinary. But this is a great way for folks to unpack it for themselves.
Yeah.
As you can see, it has got us talking. It has got us unpacking so many different elements because we can relate. I want to thank you all for being with us today on It's a Woman's World, because truly it is the magic of ordinary that brings us together. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.